Hi, good morning. It's Gene from maverickstar Observatory. I hope you're all well and good. Before we get started, as you know, it is the Wednesday, and on the Wednesday we dig out the Earth Health at a Glance equipment, which involves magnetometers, muon detectors, CO2 detectors, oxygen analyzers, and we put all the data up for you on the website poleshiftnews.com. So if you're interested in just having a look at what's happened this week and comparing it with the weeks before that, we're slowly building up a reasonable archive. Before we begin, big thanks to those people that have supported us over the last few days. And you know, guys, just a quick mention, it is one of the toughest times for the observatory at this period of the year, you know, when we try and raise a bit of funding for the observatory to keep things going. So the links are down there if you want to help support that. And if you do go onto the website, you'll see there's a donate button there. Please, guys, don't just walk past it. 7,000 people plus a week go onto the website, and very few people, you know, donate. It would be nice to see a little bit of activity with that donate tab, and we can tell what sort of donations come in on that particular website, because the donate tab goes into a different account. So I'm just trying to see what generates the most money for the observatory in splitting the two donate accounts, to see whether the website is performing more than what YouTube is. So, you know, it'd be great if a few more people would, you know, support what we do here. So let's have a look at what's been changing over the week. Starting with atmospheric CO2. We're not an observatory based on the top of a mountain in Hawaii, and why they feel that that is the best way to take the CO2 reading is beyond me, because I think if you take it regularly from one spot, you will gauge the fluctuations. And as you can see, it's at 414 parts per million. And we wouldn't want the CO2 to go any lower than that in any case, in my view, because we're already at a record all-time low for CO2 in the atmosphere if you gauge it over tens of thousands of years. If you go back millions of years, then the amount of CO2 is very, very minimal compared to what the atmospheric CO2 was back, you know, hundreds of thousands of years ago. And at that point in time, when the CO2 was very high, there was a lot of eruptions in diversities of trees, bushes, shrubs, plants, and it very likely was benefiting from the high yields of CO2 in the atmosphere. So moving on to the oxygen, you can see it's at 21.21%, which is a large reservoir of oxygen. We don't really need to worry too much about that. You know, when you look at 21.21% of our atmosphere is oxygen, that is a fantastic amount. And you know, there doesn't seem to be any major decreases in that, so we're okay with that. But nevertheless, I know that there are some people that from time to time do get concerned about the levels of oxygen in the atmosphere, because of how many people are on the planet these days, you know, consuming that oxygen. It's not just people, it's every time, you know, one revolution of your engine turns over, you know, it consumes probably 3 litres of oxygen per 1 unit of fuel. So, you know, when you consider how many cars are on the road, how many aircrafts in the air, all these things consume oxygen, you can understand why some people are a little concerned about it. Below that, we have the longitude and latitude of the magnetic North Pole location. That's only updated once a month on the 17th. We've already done it a week ago, so the change is very marginable there. Radiation background count here in the UK hasn't changed much at all. You can see it's at 00.14 microsieverts. We have a slight decline in the volcanic eruptions from last week. There was 24, this week there's 23, and the largest earthquake, as you can see, is a 5.5 off the mid-Indian ridge. Muons per meter, per square meter per hour, as you can see, has not really changed at all much from last week. We're at 438 parts per million, and I know that that is an error actually, because it should be, for some reason, 538 parts per million. so I'll make that correction a bit later on in the day for you guys. We've got an extra sunspot, and I want to show you a bit later on in the video that sunspot, because it's the size of the Earth on the sun, on the southern hemisphere of the sun, around about 30 degrees. I'll get into that a bit later on. The geomagnetic field's quiet, solar X-rays are normal. As you can see, the jet streams are unstable and have been since we've been doing the Earth Alpha at a glance. And the reason for that is because we know the jet streams around the world are being affected by the amounts of cosmic radiation that is inbound due to the weakened magnetosphere and a weakened heliosphere with regards to the low solar output that we're experiencing right now. And you can see we've got down there Hong Kong stable, Canada unstable, because we know that that region is slowly declining in intensity. And you've got the Gold Coast, Perth, Australia, Tuscan, Arizona, and you have the total overall magnetosphere strength there, still at 50. What am I thinking? Microteslas. I always get confused with microteslas and nanoteslas. We're talking microteslas, so 50 microteslas that the Earth's measure of the magnetosphere currently. So let's have a look at the southern hemisphere of the disk, and I'll show you what I'm concerned about with that. We're looking at the solar disk, and the region that I'm concerned about is 2786. As you can see there on the left hand side of the screen, south of the equator, probably around about 25 to 30 degrees. And the reason why I'm concerned about it is the size of it. Basically, you could fit the planet Earth inside that sunspot. But the other thing is, as I've mentioned a few weeks ago, is where the position of the sunspots are. We're supposed to be at solar minimum at the end of solar cycle 24, beginning cycle 25, and we're seeing sunspots that should be forming in these locations during maximum. So something very strange is going on with our sun. It's not just the fact that there's a low output of sunspots, even though that they are starting to seem like they're picking up. And the good thing about this is that it's not something that they could just produce. These mainstream organisations, you can verify this very easily with a filter over a reasonable camera with a zoom on it. And on a clear day, if you point it at the sun, and I wouldn't recommend anyone does this because it can harm the equipment that you're using if you haven't got an appropriate filter, but you can see the sunspots and verify at any given time that what they are putting out, where they are, and the images for the sunspots can be verified by you in your garden. Simple as that. I've talked about the way they count up the sunspot numbers. I think the total so far is about 37, isn't it? Something like that. Although the 3 on the disk today, the total amount for this cycle is 37, I believe, which is still considerably lower than solar cycle 24. And if you look at the scale on poleshiftnews.com, you'll see what I'm talking about. These things are still continually setting a trend in declining. So, again, we've not reached equilibrium with the grand solar minimum, and as a result of that, we know the heliosphere will be at low levels and shrinking back in on our solar system as a result, and in turn allowing more cosmic radiation in. So it's not good times when you consider all these things, and it is quite shocking really that the news of sunspots and the decline of sunspots doesn't hit the mainstream media. You always see it on social media websites with people talking about it like myself, but never really mainstream media picking up on these important aspects. At the end of the day, everything in our solar system revolves around the sun, and yet it seems like nobody's interested. It's crazy times we're living. I just thought before we end the video that I'd just share a few thoughts with you guys. We're living in strange times, and I think people are becoming more weirder and weirder. And some people can't separate, fact from fiction. It's like, I couldn't have made it any more clear this week that we were going to be using green screen shots like you're seeing here. And this is just a photo that's been downloaded from the internet and added to OBS using a chroma key. And, some people can't tell the difference you know, and don't pay any attention to what you're saying. The other day, someone said, "You're expecting us to donate to you, and look at your pad behind you." That was that photo I used of the apartments. This is probably a stately home with a library in it. I just thought, we could wind up a few more people, but it's by all means not perfect, and we're waiting for some lighting. If you just look at this region of the screen here where it's gone fuzzy, that's because of poor lighting. We are working on that. And sometimes if I look at the camera, sometimes you'll see straight through my eye as though I've got a hole in the back of my head. But it just shows you the mentality of people that we live with, and it's going to be very hard for us to work together at some point. Like I was talking about the other day in the video, I don't ever see it happening, and for that reason, the only thing that is going to happen eventually is another world war start. We do have it within our means to work together, and I think there's another thing that people got wrong. I do not support these elitist agendas, and just because globalism is one of their agendas, I do support globalism, or a federation, an international federation. How else are we going to ever tackle things like the Grand Ocean Garbage Patch? And there's several of these now floating around in our seas, but because they're in international waters, no one's taking any responsibility for clearing it up. Unless there is a federation of international countries jointly working together, these things are never going to get resolved. And it just makes me laugh how hypocritical people can be. If it wasn't for allies coming together during the Second World War, we'd never have beat the Germans, ever. So this, has to change this attitude where people automatically, because we talk about globalism, they automatically think that this is something that the elites are in control of only. And it's not. It's down to us to make those decisions and, elect through a democratic process people that would run that federation. We have to move in that direction, otherwise, because of the trouble that we have printed ourselves into with this fiat currency because of COVID-19, we've got no choice. We were either going to go to wars with countries because we've devalued the money and we've sold bonds, not just the UK but all these countries. We've all sold bonds to other countries, namely one of the biggest people that have brought these bonds, the debt, is China. And you wouldn't be happy if you'd brought debt in the pretext that you could receive a little bit of interest on top of that, something back for your investment, and then the country that you borrowed the money to devalued its currency and then just handed back big piles of this devalued currency. You would not be happy. We are making enemies out of people that have in the past helped us out, and we really need to come together at this point and start working together. It is inevitable. Even if we have a third world war, and some say that will be the last, because the fourth, if you ask Albert Einstein, he was asked that question, wasn't he? If there is, he says, when he was asked the question, what do you think the third world war will be like? He says, I don't know about the third world war. He said, but the fourth world war will be using sticks and stones. That's probably because the third world war sent us that far back into the dark ages. I know a lot of you guys are capable of logic thinking, and when I'm talking about an international federation being organised, it is for the purpose of tackling climate, energy, world food production, because we need to start to realise that we've got a big major problem evolving because of this extra cosmic rays inbound is destroying crops, it's changing the climate. And unless there is a federation, an international federation set aside to deal with these things, then we're going to find ourselves in a lot of trouble. And the other thing is that if ever we do get these international federations emerge, they have to be audited. This is just not an excuse for these rich elites to start stealing the money like they have done in this crisis. We know that here in the UK alone, we've printed over £80 billion this year. And the governments now are trying to think of ways that they can raise taxes to pay this money back. we're facing a lot of problems. Through COVID-19 and the policies that have been implemented, I would say that 40% of the businesses in certain areas have already gone to the wall. And in turn, jobs. And the knock-on effect has meant that people have lost their homes as well. And, as a result of losing this, suicide is going to go on the increase. It's happening in every sector. If we look at the farmers, one farmer a week in the UK committing suicide, more farmers in the United States committing suicide than veterans, just to put it into perspective. 12,000 or more a year in India killing themselves because of the crop failures. And we got our politicians all around the world sitting on their arses pretty much doing nothing, and a lot of the time their hands are tied because these are international problems and there isn't a federation there that can step in and resolve these issues. Floods, famine, droughts, crop disasters, changing climate, pole shift, grand solar minimum, all these things are real, part of the obstacles that we face, and we're still squabbling on whether or not globalism is just for the elites and not for the benefit of humankind, and as a result of benefiting from it, humankind, the rest of the biodiversity does. It means we have an opportunity to be good stewards, but no one's going to do it on their own. No single country in the world is going to foot the bill for anything outside its boundaries, outside its 6-mile coastline, or outside of international waters. They're not going to do it. So how else do we tackle this problem? We need to, at the grassroots, I know we're just individuals, but at the grassroots we need to change the attitude to this. Otherwise this is something that's never going to get resolved. And if we continue down this road, then there is war over, what I consider the barbaric act of printing up, wealth. You just cannot generate wealth out of thin air like they're doing right now. And the printing of this fiat currency is devaluing the pound right now in your very pocket, and my pocket, and everyone's pocket, globally. We face a time where we have got to start, moving in a different direction, because if we continue on the path of where we are, we're just going to increase technology, which is going to take more jobs away from people. And when you do that, you bar people from accessing money, and that means they can't participate in this monetary system that we've got, and it really does cascade and fold upon itself. What level of suffering is it going to be recognised that this is not a very good direction that we're travelling in, and there is a need to take another direction? We have got an opportunity here, just facing what we have done already with COVID-19. If it isn't these elites that have stole the money and they're just using this to reset the global debt, then we could use this for something else. We could move in a different direction. It's going to happen, guys. Even if we have a war tomorrow, a third world war, it's going to happen. We are going to merge as a global federation at some point. I said this, it's not uncommon for us to work together. In the United States, there's over 50 states that make up the USA. In the UK, we've got Britain, Scotland, England, Ireland and Wales. So we're already on a microscale working together. We've got the European bloc, of countries that are part of Europe, that we are just exiting from. But, if we are going to merge into a federation, an international federation, it needs to be done sooner rather than later, and we need to elect somebody to run that federation for us, and every country has to pour into it. It's got to be something along the lines of Europe, but not as corrupt. That's what it's got to be, I think, and it needs to happen real quick. Otherwise we are merging into a very dark era, and we will all fear it, just like the Egyptian pharaoh did back in his day. So I just wanted to share a few thoughts with you guys. I'll be interested in your comments, and you know what, This isn't my house, by the way. This is just a photograph off the internet that has been put on a green screen just to make it more aesthetically pleasing for people. You know, I haven't really got a problem showing you my living room, you know, but at the end of the day, let's use some logic sense, yeah, and give a bit of thought to what I said. And you never know what can start at these grassroots. You know, big things can come when many people share the same idea and enthusiasm for something. But I am interested in your thoughts. And guys, you know, again, I hate having to mention this, but you know, we do run an observatory which is publicly funded, which is being poorly funded at the moment. You know, there are some links down there if you want to help, you know, support what we're doing. And guys, more than ever now, we're doing more. So we shouldn't be penalised. We should be, you know, supported. So you know, there's some links down there if you want to help support us. And you know, I'll bid you a great afternoon, and you know, we'll catch up at some point in this week, and you know, I'll show you another fantastic living room or a scene on the beach or something, you know, sunglasses time maybe. Okay, I'll say what I usually do. You have a great day, and as always, bye for now.